Hi, my name is Jack Brewer, and this is the Wayward Sons Book Group, where we read and discuss my nonfiction book, Wayward Sons, NICAP, and the IC. I'm with Expanding Frontiers Research, where you can visit us at expandingfrontiersresearch.org to find more resources and interesting posts and videos. Tonight, we will be reading and discussing Chapter 12, which is about Joseph Bryan's psychological warfare crew that he ran in the Office of Policy Coordination. That was a CIA and State Department front during the mid 20th century. So stick around, lots of interesting things to come in this episode while we explore records obtained through the Freedom of Information Act and other similar materials. But first, let's start with the week's events. And has anyone had any thoughts on or taken any looks at the clips from the MK Ultra hearings? What are our thoughts about that?
No, I feel like it's interesting. You've done this book club pretty much simultaneous to a lot of interesting developments and kind of the congressional level, although not interesting in any sort of like beneficial way, just kind of interesting as in a car crash kind of way. But yeah, I mean I watched basically the whole thing, a rerun of it. I wasn't expecting much. Didn't get much. I think the way I would describe it is nothing that you couldn't read in Poisoner in Chief or Chaos. And they had one speaker from the NIH for some reason. I'm not sure why, but they just kept grilling her about COVID, which has nothing to do with MK Ultra, and it didn't seem like she was especially knowledgeable on MK Ultra. So really nothing interesting happened.
What was the purpose of the hearing?
Publicity.
You got me.
Publicity is a good guess. I would speculate that the COVID topic somehow ties into, it's my understanding that Luna has had an agenda of devaluing vaccinations, and she cites CIA covert human experimentation, MK Ultra, as reasons that vaccinations should be questioned. And here's my problem with it in a nutshell. We're going to be talking about MK Ultra and related projects in this chapter. The documents are real, the circumstances are real, but that doesn't keep people from exploiting them and misrepresenting them for their own agendas. And I personally have little faith in the way some of this is being represented in the media. We've talked before about how people try to, or at least they ostensibly say they're separating politics from their topic of interest. Well, you can't when it's a congressional hearing. I mean, politics are inherent to it. That's just kind of my 2 cents on it. But I would like to hear others, what your takeaways are, what you think the agendas are, and things like, or at least what you're seeing people talk about. Like, here's another potential talking point. I see people on social media acting as if things they're hearing about MK Ultra are wild and oh my gosh. And it is information that if they could look and do some of the research is already available. And it's kind of being misrepresented too. And in my opinion, some of these people, I have doubts that they're really even interested in the information as much as trying to increase the politicians' credibility and agendas that are presenting it. So like that could be a talking point as well.
In the upside down, or as we like to call it on X, there's conspiracy theorists that were basically saying, you know, thank a conspiracy theorist today because they're the ones that brought you this trial, which is interesting because it had nothing to do with journalism or the government process at all. It had to do with conspiracy theorists banding together and doing whatever they think they were doing. So another interesting take to, like you said, that credibility is earned in a very backwards way. And they have those folks to look up to and idolize and thinking they're doing the people's work. So it's really backwards. And I thought that it's interesting. Tanner said this too, like we're kind of parallel to a lot of current events. This is such a good shoe-in to like pick up your book and read it and actually learn about the coordination of what's going on and how things like MKUltra gets started, funded, and things we will get into. But I wish people would just take a hint, but they're just there to confirm their own bias. It looks like.
Oftentimes,
that's why I push back against the term conspiracy theory, because we are dealing with a conspiracy. Like MKUltra was a conspiracy. The people now pushing MKUltra are conspiracizing together. Like there are real conspiracies. The problem is when the ones that are not real are the ones that are kind of boosted in this. And that's sort of, I mean, it's sort of bringing MKUltra into that realm of stuff that doesn't make any sense, you know?
That's true. We can call them conspiracy activists, but they still were not the catalyst for what they think happened, right? But it's a good point to say that, yeah, conspiracy theories, like conspiracy is a thing when it's founded in fact, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and the church hearings, the MKUltra hearings are available. The transcripts are available. They're cited in books like the one that we're reading and discussing. Yeah, I mean that these are good points. Go find out what happened and read about it. It is interesting. It did matter for a lot of reasons, just typically not the ones that people are hyperventilating about or like that are clearly trying to get your emotional investment in. Yeah.
Jack, I remember you once said something along the lines of, I resent the absurd conspiracies because they make it that much harder to make people aware of the real conspiracies, the validated conspiracies. And we're seeing a lot of that right now. Things being extrapolated into sensationalism and narratives that just aren't supported when there's verifiable narratives and information there that can really be discerning and educational that's just being overlooked.
Great point. And whether it's their agenda or not, they do make a group like this, the things that we're discussing and studying, further marginalized. That if it's the term MKUltra is even in there, there's a growing percentage of the public that will just not even want to hear about it because it's just too far flung. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting you mentioned they're talking about Luna's using this as like an excuse for like vaccine hesitancy. But if you look at the actual programs historically that have dealt with like vaccination programs, it's typically not in the United States, or if it is in the United States, it's all marginalized communities or third world countries across the globe. And of course, these people don't care about those populations, and they don't seem to recognize that it was sort of their political ideology that even led to MK Ultra, and I find that incredibly frustrating.
Absolutely. I think one of the themes that I found while writing this book was that the CIA officers and assets felt micromanaged and that they had to work outside the box in order to do the right things or to advance their agenda, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they thought was the proper things to be doing. While at the same time, oversight committees were completely frustrated and felt handcuffed, like they didn't have enough control. And I'm certainly not proposing solutions, but I think it's an interesting dynamic to notice and see. And you're absolutely right that who does Representative Luna even think she's pointing the finger at of being a tyrannical body? It's just such circular logic that's difficult to follow and dissect, even if you're just trying to do it from a sociologist type of way.
It's also interesting to note that the vaccine and the overall COVID response was spearheaded by Trump, right, under his administration. Operation Warp Speed to get this vaccine.
This it was, yes, it was. Any other thoughts on that or any other observations during the week?
I wanted to.
What you're, oh, oops, you want to
Go
go?
ahead.
What you're describing, what you all describing is like, with the COVID response under Trump. It's all of it is trying to control history.
Rewrite history, right?
To rewrite history, right? Correct. And if you can rewrite history, then you can direct, control the future, control the direction of the future in a way.
Or at the very least, the present.
Yes. And then with Luna, with the vaccine, that if you think of it in terms of, okay, well, what would that do? That would weaken, a sicker population's easier to control. A weakened military is going to be less effective. So who would want to do that? Well, somebody that would want to weaken America, which would not be a good act.
All right, this is on a different topic, but I just wanted to mention two tidbits that I didn't get to mention since I wasn't here the past couple of weeks. One was, I think it was in chapter 10, there was just a very brief mention of Charles Olivier as being a board member of NICAP, and he was the president of the American Meteor Society. And that just caught my attention because the American Meteor Society is still around. I interacted with them, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. They have a great website where you can report fireballs if you see them in the sky, and then they group all the reports together and create like event pages that show, try to estimate where the fireball was coming from and heading. And it's very, very cool and very well done. And so I just wondered so I looked up some stuff about Olivier, and he wasn't just the president of AMS, he was also the founder of it. And I was just kind of curious how he might have got involved in NICAP and what his interest was. And the one thing I found was actually in the UFO evidence by Richard Hall. It mentioned, said that there was like a statement from the board and a separate statement from Charles Olivier, who just said that he doesn't know what UFOs are. He doesn't have any theory as to what they are. He just thinks that they should be studied scientifically and not ridiculed. So that was interesting. I guess I would still kind of be curious to find out how he got involved in NICAP, just because, I mean, he was an astronomer around the same time as Donald Menzel, and Menzel was such a skeptic, and was able to document a lot of UFO reports and what they really were. So I was just curious about that. And then as I was looking up stuff about him, I came across an audio recording of a NICAP press conference that was right after, I think, that they found out about the trick memo. And basically it was Donald Kehoe denouncing the Condon Report. And it was recorded by Philip Klass, the noted UFO skeptic. And it was just about a little over an hour long. And it was just kind of interesting, especially the last bit. It was kind of entertaining because Kehoe and Klass were kind of sparring with each other a little bit. When Kehoe questioned the objectivity of the Condon Report, Klass spoke up and questioned the objectivity of NICAP. But anyway, so there was some discussion towards the end about Kehoe's finances, which we had mentioned before in the past. And Kehoe said something to the effect of basically he's making 1/6 of what he used to make as a freelance writer at NICAP. And even though he'd written at the time 4 books on the topic, he said that once you pay income taxes on those, that you don't really make that much from them. And so anyway, there was a little bit about his finances there, which was just interesting. And the last little bit, which I thought was interesting, was he said at the very end how, like, once you get into this topic, if you ever like suddenly quit it, people are going to question you. And I just thought that was interesting. Like, he was just kind of aware that he almost might like disappoint people if he got out of the UFO topic. And he said specifically he was hooked into it because of that. So that's just what I wanted to share. I thought some of that was interesting.
Thank you. Good work, Randy. That is interesting, the class recording. And frequently, one of the things I've appreciated about revisiting this book and going through it again, I'll be looking at the records that I link, and I'll look at something and I'll go, yeah, I never checked who this guy was. Like, it'll say 2 or 3 people did something and I won't know who one of them is or something. So yeah, I envision we could even evolve into like a type of research group or something to that effect, or, keep in touch and like do a FOIA request on Olivier and things like that, and see what else we could find out about him. Oftentimes when I see someone on the board, my first guess is typically that someone like de Roquefort or Carvalho or Townsend Brown just wrote them and asked them to be on the board. And it seemed like it'd be more helpful than not to them and their organization. But I don't know. That's just always my first guess. I wonder about a lot of stuff like that, like the whole Arnold Krugman hanging around this whole crew. Like, you know, you can kind of surmise how they know each other. Like, how do we all know each other? You know, similar interests, but there's still a story of, well, what was the first time you interacted and what were the circumstances and how did it lead to being on the beach at Kitty Hawk with the Wright brothers, you know, and stuff like that. But good work. That's interesting. And I indeed will see what else we can possibly learn about Olivier.
I'll post the link to that recording in the comments.
Thank you.
I'll mention Olivier was tracking basically flying saucers since June 1947. In fact, he was asked at an astronomy convention back then with people like Hallow Shepley, the Harvard director of Harvard Observatory, the guy who allegedly put Menzel up to his whole UFO shtick in the first place. And he was asked what he thought about like the sightings and things that people were saying. And so I think he probably developed an interest, you know, in the early days and kind of stuck around the topic. I'll also mention, yeah, the American Meteor Society is still around. And as Randy pointed out, they've got a great website where you can look at fireball sightings. And it's actually really interesting to look at it because if you go look at a fireball sighting, you can see in these reports how eyewitness testimony is not that accurate. You'll get a large amount of people that will say the fireball is generally going in the same direction and the same move, doing the same things. But there's always a handful of people that think the fireball was going in a different direction or it did something weird, like it made a turn or something amazing. And you can look at that in basically every major, like large fireball sighting on the AMS website. You can see how people interpret these events differently. And so while the vast majority of people generally get details right, there's always outliers of people that think that got the details completely opposite from what they really were.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, they also post videos on YouTube of like I think that, well anyway, yeah, they post videos of bolids on YouTube. They're pretty fun to watch.
Thank you. Well, shall we start on chapter 12?
Chapter 12, the OPC Psi Warfare Crew. FAOI requests submitted to the FBI resulted into some 50 pages of records on Lewis Pinky Steenrod Thompson Jr., 1904 to 1965. The majority of the records are FBI memos pertaining to Thompson that resulted from special inquiries. A 1941 memo pictured in part on the following page with the misspelling of Lewis as Louise shows the initial request for FBI investigation. A chain of investigations on Pinky Thompson was undertaken that included the participation of FBI offices from Boston to New Orleans and several points in between. The numerous resulting reports indicate he was born in 1904 in New York City, raised in Massachusetts, and attended Princeton University, where he played football and had considerably above average grades. He graduated in 1926 with an AB degree. He made his home on what was described as an estate in Red Bank, New Jersey, when he was not relocating for work. He came from a wealthy family, having made its mark in the oil business. Thompson continued the tradition, working for Standard Oil. Incidentally, Standard Oil would later be identified as sharing a history with the CIA forerunner, the Office of Strategic Services. The families Vanderbilt, DuPont, Archibald, Standard Oil, Ryan, Equitable Life Insurance, Vail, Macy's Department Store, and Whitney were all represented in the ranks of Wild Bill Donovan's OSS Army, wrote Frances Stoner Saunders on page 29 of her book, The Cultural Cold War. You will recall Colonel Bryan married into the Whitney family, according to a previously referenced FBI report. Thompson's father passed away, leaving him large stock holdings in Standard Oil. This gave him a financial worth of some $7 million in the 1930s. Pinky married twice and had 3 children. His associates and neighbors consistently described him as having excellent character. His credit record was very good, and his loyalty to the United States was unquestioned. FBI interviews showed him again and again to be thought of as honest and high in integrity. Thompson's mother was a prominent New Jersey political activist. She was a registered Republican, as was Pinky. The Red Bank police chief described the Thompsons as a well-respected family. Thompson was a longstanding member of the American Prison Association. He served as a member of the New Jersey State Prison Board of Managers in 1936 and sat on the New Jersey State Parole Board in 1941. Fred Moss, a New York City oil businessman and former employer of Thompson, stated Thompson was an excellent salesman and entirely reliable. He added the Thompson family was friends with the Roosevelts. Mr. J.C. Richdale, another oil executive, explained to the Bureau he had known Pinky all his life. He told an agent that Lewis S. Thompson, Sr. was a hero in the First World War. At the time of the veteran's death, Richdale explained, Time magazine ran a long article honoring him and his service. Richdale added he was positive Pinky wanted to follow in the footsteps of his father. Mr. Richdale stated that he had just returned from New York City, the 1941 FBI report continued. And while there, he had heard that Thompson had gone to Washington, D.C. to offer his services in government defense work. It is not difficult to surmise Thompson would have been considered favorably by certain potential government employers, given such investigation findings from the FBI. In the early 1940s, he worked with the Office of Production Management and the War Production Board. Bureau files indicate it was during this time in 1942 Hoover received a letter from the Office of Emergency Management inquiring about Thompson. Insomuch as Mr. Thompson has access to extremely confidential material, the letter stated, it will be appreciated if this case can be expedited so that we may have a report as soon as possible. Hoover replied an investigation was completed on Thompson for the Office of Production Management. He pointed out some 6 different reports were compiled by various field offices in cities across the nation where Thompson resided and/or conducted business. Hoover included a copy of each report in his response. The Office of Emergency Management should not be confused with the Office of Emergency Management. Office for Emergency Management should not be confused with the Office of Emergency Management. The parent agency of the former, where Thompson worked, was the Executive Office of the President. The Office for Emergency Management, in turn, was the parent agency of some half-dozen additional agencies and several departments to be found within them. They included the Office of Production Management and the War Production Board, each of which became recognized by the FBI as employers of Thompson. A 1943 FBI report composed by an agent of the Washington Field Office indicated Thompson had a brush in 1942 with the subject of an espionage investigation. It seems that Madame Helen Jules Henry was the subject of an espionage-F investigation, and Thompson owned a car that showed up at the house where she resided. The occupants of the automobile registered to Thompson were seen to enter the house where Madame Jules Henry was living. It was documented in the previously referenced 1953 memo on Thompson contained in the file compiled on Joseph Bryan. The memo indicated that in 1942, Thompson was working for the Office of Production Management, followed by the War Production Board that same year. It might therefore be somewhat reasonably assumed his employment in some way shaped the circumstances of his automobile turning up at the residence of Jules Henry. There were no apparent consequences to Thompson arising out of the incident. That same 1953 memo, subject Louis Steenrod Thompson, also known as Pinky Thompson, states the Bureau conducted 2 applicant-type investigations on Thompson. They occurred in 1941, as we explored, and again in 1950. The 1953 memo, composed for FBI Assistant Director Nichols per his instructions, indicated the 1950 investigation correlated with Thompson's application to work with the CIA. From the 2nd and 3rd pages of the memo, it might be considered interesting that years after the 1942 Jules Henry incident, and according to 1953 minutes on file at the CIA, Thompson provided DCI Dulles with a document pertaining to the Julius and Ethel Rosenberg case. An FBI investigation launched in 1949 discovered the couple to be the driving force behind a spy chain responsible for transferring state secrets pertaining to the atomic bomb. In 1950, the Rosenbergs were arrested and charged with numerous crimes stemming from espionage conspiracy. In 1951, they were convicted and issued death sentences. Following failed attempts through the court to avoid the sentences, they were each executed at Sing Sing Prison in New York on June 19, 1953. From January 28, 1953 CIA meeting minutes.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. Thank you. So Pinky Thompson, you'll recall, I was alerted to because he had some records in the FBI file on Bryan. So then that led me down that rabbit hole. And these are the types of things I was discovering about Pinky Thompson. So I think in order to help keep context here, Director of Central Intelligence Admiral Hillenkoetter was the director of the CIA from 1947 to 1950. And he went on to be the chairman of the board of NICAP in 1957 to 1962. About 1948 to approximately 1952, 1953, Joseph Bryan was a CIA asset in the Office of Policy Coordination, operating a psychological warfare team. That Office of Policy Coordination was a covert arm of the CIA and State Department. When General Walter Bedell Smith took over the CIA as the director in 1950, he transferred the chain of command through his office so that Frank Wisner and the Office of Policy Coordination answered to the Director of Central Intelligence. And that was up until 1952, when it was absorbed into another division of the CIA, but continued, and as we explored earlier in the book, arguably was continuing to increase its operations that were mind-bogglingly effectively expanded under Frank Wisner. So I think it's important to have that context of Hillenkoetter, 1947 to 1950, Smith, 1950 to 53, Allen Dulles after 1953, and Joseph Bryan, 1948 to about 1953. And we can see then we're getting a look at what Pinky Thompson was doing for the CIA, as obstructed as the picture may be, but we're getting an idea of what that may have been and over that time frame. That doesn't necessarily tell us more about NICAP, but it does give us some insight into Joseph Bryan and Roscoe Hillenkoetter that we don't seem to be getting from the UFO community, if not obstruction and arguably credulous points of view from the UFO community, in my opinion. And I think that this context, I think, is important to know and have.
I had a comment, I guess. I always wondered, and this is something you can maybe sketch but not really conclude. I always wondered with those changes, if there were policy changes towards their view of NICAP and whatever groups were infiltrated at that time, if it like spread out, or I guess like MKUltra was also springing up. I just wondered who supported those policies, who inherited them, and but I say policies, I mean like, yeah, let the NICAP thing run its course. I always wonder, because I always think of the movie like Departed, where the mole's direct report becomes deceased, and then you're like, wait a minute, now I'm just like lost in what and I'm just wondering if like the toothpaste came out and it didn't come in, and they just were. I'm speculating, but have you thought about that and figured out what NICAP's view was based on the regime changes or like the leadership changes?
I have thought about it, and NICAP wasn't incorporated until later in the 1950s, in 1956. And so we would then have to follow
right
the CIA leadership through that. And I do think that's relevant. Like, I feel like it's a pretty safe bet that, for instance, as NICAP was grinding gears with the Air Force and with Condon in the late 1960s, I think one of the reasons that it may have become, if we're correct that Joseph Bryan shut it down in 1969 as it was, shut it down by discharging Kehoe and Gordon Lohr, I think that may have had some relation to an insider's awareness that like church committee hearings are coming, that cats are getting out of the bag, there's problems here. And this worked for a while for some things, and now it's time for Donald Kehoe to shut the hell up and us to get this settled down. I don't think it was a big part of it, but I think it probably does reflect some overall CIA culture that we're cutting bait, we're getting everything as sensible as possible, and we're not going to be sitting on Capitol Hill talking about what we're doing running UFO investigations. That's one of my guesses. I think there's more, like you're saying. I think it would be interesting to correlate things throughout the 1960s. And I mean, Kehoe obviously got a lot of play from Congress. I mean, a lot of, and it is just fascinating how this mirrors today, that a lot of representatives and senators were willing to dance with Kehoe, open his mail, read it, write back, invite him in to talk to him and his personnel and talk to his board members. I don't really know exactly what that reflects.
NICAP was pretty big culture though, right? I mean, their subscription numbers were high. It was relevant.
Yeah. They were successful in getting this stuff in the newspaper. How much did the CIA help? How much did Congress help? How much was it a mutually beneficial thing to have the American public and the press disturbed up to an extent, but not too much? I don't know. Those are really good questions, really good topics that you're implying, Bryan.
I think the last little comment too is there's an awful lot of rich people from Princeton that were also in the CIA. That was like everybody's like an elite, and they're also part of the government, and also own large companies. It's crazy.
That there were. Where we're headed with this too, that gets complicated as we continue in this chapter. We're going to see where Nelson Rockefeller was appointed to operate an oversight committee and seems to have decided that it was pointless, that he wasn't going to be able to do it or get people to comply with it. An oversight committee for CIA and covert activities. And CIA was supposed to be giving his group the funds it needed to do this. So Nelson Rockefeller was exchanging memos with Lloyd, who was on the OPC psychological warfare team, because later he was in an accounting role with the CIA. And so you literally have people that were involved in the operations that are supposed to be complying with and helping coordinate oversight. And I don't know, what do you do? Just laugh and shrug and say, I guess that's the 60s. I mean, like Rockefeller just identified, we need to just shut this down because, we're asking people for the money to do the oversight that they were allocated to do the operations that we're trying to monitor. Was just crazy,
Well, I think not to question Nelson Rockefeller's interests, but his relatives were somewhat key to, even precursors to the Office of Policy Coordination and the Psychological Warfare Board, kind of in World War II international boards, essentially birthed this kind of field of psychological propagandistic operations abroad, and a lot of that was folded in. I mean, you mentioned Francis Stoner Saunders, and that'll certainly make you wonder about the Rockefeller family a bit more. And I can't really remember how in Nelson Rockefeller was with them. I'm mostly familiar with John and, of course, Lawrence because of all his UFO stuff, but I don't know. What's your take on Nelson?
That's an excellent point, and I think again it reflects current circumstances that we were talking about that are currently happening on Capitol Hill with UFO hearings and MKUltra hearings. And we had at that time Rockefeller, Joe Biden was involved in hearings. People that led the circumstances to where they were then the oversight of it. And that's later on, coming up too, a little closer look at that. And I think that's very relevant to consider. I think someone, as we were talking before we started recording, made the comparison of the goings-ons on Capitol Hill to professional wrestling, and I think that's a pretty apt comparison with what we're looking at here too, with Rockefeller and Lloyd and the Office of Policy Coordination. And I've made the comparison too that it becomes a shell game. That nope, no more OPC. Now it's the Directorate of Plans. Nope, no more Directorate of Plans. We merged that with, some other office, and just, around and around it goes. But I think that's a very valid point to bring up that Rockefeller may have had a number of interests other than conducting good, wholesome oversight.
It's actually concerning how often we see, whether past or present, how often the former heads of corporations and industries go on to be the overseers, appointed overseers, allegedly for the public good of those very industries. Yeah, and talk about conflict of interest, you know?
Yes, Alan Dulles and his brother, who also, Alan Dulles became the director of the CIA, and his brother, I'm wanting to say Secretary of State, I think, or of Defense. He held a significant post. They were on the board of and significant stakeholders in the United Fruit Company that helped conduct the coup in Guatemala. Yeah. And so, yeah, they had financial interests as well as political interests in the circumstances. So you're absolutely right, Steve.
There's a good book on that, Bitter Fruit by Stephen Kinzer, who was just on Capitol Hill a few days ago, talking about MKUltra. See, I'm trying to tie it all back into modern stuff again.
Yes, it ties pretty well, doesn't it? Who would like to read next?
I received the previously explored PDF from the FBI pertaining to Joseph Bryan III. I blogged about it and pointed out it did not escape my attention the memo on Pinky Thompson contained in the file was dated April 17th, 1953, just 4 days after the start of Project MKUltra. DCI Alan Dulles officially authorized the now infamous project on April 13th, 1953. There seemed to be several implications of MKUltra in the unfolding FOIA material I was obtaining in my pursuit of learning more about Joseph Bryan. Among them were the repeating overlap with biological warfare, the 1953 FBI memo on the brainwashing film that documented a meeting in the Attorney General office attended by Dulles and Hoover with reference to Bryan. $75,000 reportedly dumped by CIA officer Pinky Thompson upon a desk in Europe in the mid-1950s, and even Thompson's participation on governing boards within the prison system seemed potentially advantageous to the agency. Preferring to err on the side of caution in my blog posts, I gave the circumstances mentioned but offered no opinions, inventorying them for the record and allowing readers to make of it what they would. I subsequently heard from and consulted with multiple researchers knowledgeable on the topics. It was suggested to me the material could be interpreted to imply the FBI and CIA collaborated to various degrees on research related to interrogation techniques, or essentially projects leading up to and including MKUltra. The April 1953 memo pertaining to Thompson clearly indicated he was vetted for employment with the CIA in June 1950, quite possibly due to his work with Joseph Bryan's Psychological Warfare Division within the Office of Policy Coordination. Moreover, the 1953 memo could easily be interpreted to indicate he was being vetted by the FBI at the time of its composition, for what knowledgeable sources suggested to me could possibly have been his inclusion in work related to Project MKUltra. You will recall that is the memo on Thompson located in the FBI file on Bryan, with Bryan's name added by hand below the subject line. Among the people who reached out to me about the blog post was researcher Mary Jo Watts, who stated she had extensively documented MKUltra subprojects and how they were funded. Her initial message somewhat amusingly expressed her observation. My post referencing the above FOIA documents danced all around MKUltra without overtly suggesting its apparent relation. She explained she was quite familiar with Thompson through her own research, suggested he was heavily implicated in the MKUltra saga, and volunteered receipts if I wanted to see them. Indeed, I did. In subsequent correspondence, Watts provided me with various tips and copies of newspaper clippings, including a 1965 death announcement for Thompson. The announcement stated, in lieu of flowers, contributions may be made to Geschickter Fund for Medical Research, Georgetown University Hospital. A 1965 obituary published in a DC newspaper and archived at the CIA states Thompson, described as a CIA aide, died after a long illness. Anyone familiar with the MKUltra saga, transcripts of the resulting Senate hearings, and works such as The Search for the Manchurian Candidate by John Marks should recognize the significance of the Geschichte Fund. In the years after Thompson's death, the fund was identified as among the most significant conduits for the covert transfer of CIA funding to institutions conducting MKUltra subprojects. The Geschickter Fund was a preferred CIA cover managed by Dr. Charles Geschickter and as reported by John Marks. It served as a CIA cutout, Marks wrote. He further explained the Geschickter Fund for Medical Research was a Washington, D.C. family foundation headed by Dr. Geschickter, who provided the agency with a variety of services for more than a decade. The circumstances were more recently summarized by the Hoya, a Georgetown publication. It noted Dr. Charles Geschickter was a Georgetown University professor of pathology who, according to CIA documents, had top secret clearance and received CIA funding to construct a new research wing in the Georgetown University Medical Center. A description of the proposed facility, the Gorman Annex, suggested that human patients and volunteers would be available for experimental purposes. The testing began in March 1959. Further information is available through the now declassified CIA material on MKUltra Subproject 35, which involved construction of a new research wing at Georgetown Hospital. The arrangement enabled CIA covert research and undercover personnel. The Geschickter Fund funneled money to many MKUltra subprojects, and in addition to Subproject 35, Dr. Geschickter served as an asset on Subproject 6 of Project MK Search, the successor to MKUltra. A portion of the transcript of August 3, 1977 Senate hearings on MKUltra reads, authorization to contribute CIA funds toward construction of the Gorman Annex is continued in Subproject 35 of MKUltra. Recently discovered material indicated that Dr. Geschickter continued his research for sleep and amnesia-producing drugs on Project MK Search through July 1967 at Georgetown University Hospital. The involvement of Dr. Geschickter and his family foundation in CIA behavior modification research is considered common knowledge among historians. It is indeed noteworthy that respects to a deceased CIA employee were requested to be expressed through contributions to the Geschickter Fund, the 1965 death announcement provided by Mary Jo Watts. Watts additionally supplied me with a copy of a clipping from the June 22, 1963 edition of the Asbury Park, New Jersey Press. The clipping indicated a relationship between Pinky's son and the Geschickter Fund. The article announced the marriage of Louis Steenrod Thompson III, son of Mr. and Mrs. Louis S. Thompson Jr. The bridegroom, Thompson III, was reported to be with the Geschickter Fund for Medical Research of Georgetown University Hospital. Watts provided yet another clipping, this one from the May 28th, 1963 Red Bank, New Jersey Register. The article explained an ongoing court trial reached its fifth week concerning allegations of a racehorse owned by Pinky Thompson failed post-race drug tests. The horse, Star Ice, was disqualified after winning 2 races, and the purses from each were forfeited. Thompson and the horse trainer denied any wrongdoing. Interestingly, Dr. Geschickter testified on their behalf. Dr. Charles Geschickter of Washington testified yesterday that on a basis of reports made by 3 Washington authorities on a Star Ice urine specimen in September 1959, he would conclude there was no presence of a drug in the nature of amphetamine, the article reported. It seems some of us may have stranger job perks than others.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for reading.
You're welcome.
Any comments or observations, or should we continue reading?
Where the heck did he get amphetamines for his racehorse? Inconceivable.
Yeah, isn't it? Isn't it? And in comes, the doctor, like a Beatles song, Rocky Raccoon or something. Yeah, to explain it's all a misunderstanding.
Feel good over here.
Yeah, yeah.
So do I understand this right? So Pinky Thompson died, and basically in lieu of flowers, they essentially suggested you left contributions to what was funding the MKUltra program?
You read that right. That's correct.
That just strikes me as wild.
Or at least where the funds were going. Yes, like CIA was building the arm of the hospital at Georgetown for considerations on putting personnel in it that would be unobstructed. And yes, Pinky Thompson's obituary said, in lieu of flowers, throw some money in that fund. Yeah.
Hey, Jack and group, what? Okay, so we're like crowdsourcing the CIA. That's crazy. Does that happen now, today? Has it always happened? Is there a financial aspect to operations that aren't? Is this how you hide money? You know what I'm saying? Like, innocent question. I'm pretty sure I know the answer is yes, but can you give examples of how they do this either today or throughout what you've seen in your research other than MKUltra? Because it sounds like this is like a standard operating procedure of how to launder money.
I'm sure
Yeah.
they're just trying to save the taxpayers some dollars, right?
Yes, no more abuse and waste. That's correct.
You try to sell a little crank, save John Q. Public a couple of tax dollars, and what do you get? A congressional hearing.
That's true. Drugs, right? That's a thing. Right?
Yeah. That's one of the first things that comes to mind is accusations of drug trafficking and gun trafficking. Another thing that I have a blog post about at the EFR website and blog is I think it was the 1970s, may have been later, but I'm wanting to think it was around that same era that the church committee was starting to say, what are you guys doing? And I think funding got tighter. I think they got increasingly creative for funding. And there was a realtor in South Florida that went to authorities and said he was approached by 2 men identifying themselves as CIA operatives that wanted him to help them with a mortgage scam. And he claimed that it went into the millions of dollars and that it had ruined his firm, his real estate brokerage. And interestingly, one of the reasons this really caught my attention is the CIA acknowledged these two men were assets, that they had been employed by the agency. They just denied that the two men were acting on the agency's behalf when they approached the realtor. Neither one went to court, and to the best of my knowledge, were never found after the charges were filed. And I think the realtor ended up in legal jeopardy himself, because it became kind of clear that if it had worked out and he'd been profiting from it, he would have never went to the authorities. But yeah, there are a lot of circumstances that can be cited of questionable CIA ventures. In more common times, I think that they are investing in startups. I have some interviews on the EFR website too, like with a Dr. Andreessen, that she explained and was interested in how the CIA had investment funds for startups, and that it wasn't like a covert thing. It was like, you're going to the CIA for money, and who can even say what authority they get in a company or its products and distribution for financing it and profiting from it. And that led to my learning about something that's called an SGE, a special government employee, who can be collecting profits or salaries from the company, the government, and other interests all simultaneously, that acts as a liaison between all of these different interests.
So we literally have Pinky Thompsons today, like that. That's essentially what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying, pretty much. Yeah.
It's so funny how you can take these models and just apply it today. It's not even it's creative in the sense of execution and tactics, but like the playbook is just not any. It's not any different. What do you? And sorry, I don't want to go into. I'll ask you maybe later, but is there anything that pertains to what we've talked about in this like disclosure movement, I guess, or common names in the future, or I'm sorry, in the present time, that have accepted those economic, like, is our TTSA folks involved? I'm just like a really quick.
That's actually how I ended up in communication with Dr. Jensine Andreessen. She was researching some of the UFO startups.
Oh, weird. Okay, this is kind of a weird circle. Okay.
Yeah, and
I'd say go with your gut on that one too.
Well, we were just talking about Teal, and we were talking about, like, that is obviously, if you're going to do a startup and they have government contracts and it's VC started, there's 4 names you can think of off the top of your head right away.
A lot of his projects have been Jack, is it called NQTEL, the CIA?
It is
startup.
Yeah, they invested in Palantir.
Yeah, Teal specifically has multiple fingers and pies that have received NQTEL money.
So
Andreessen also brought up groups like Enigma, who hide and shield who the owners of the company are, right? They want us to give them access to our personal information, but yet they won't even divulge the owners of the company.
Used an alias for an interview, and the journalist and the editor were cool with that too. Wow. That was amazing.
And like she brought up the point of, the best case scenario and a worst case scenario is that's a company owned by a rich American who's, using that for nefarious purposes or something. Worst case scenario, what if it's a foreign government, right? What if it's an agent of a foreign government that's owning that?
Yeah, that was one of the things I found interesting about it was that Dr. Andreessen brought up the possibility that as an organization may put applications on your phone and things like that, and they collect all this data and they feed it into an AI, and then they can have that AI present reports in any way they want. Like, sure, it can be, give me a map of where these people reported UFOs. Sure, you could do it that way. Or you could ask what kind of cars they drive, or what kind of refrigerators they own, or how frequently they mow their lawn, or credit card debt, or anything else you want to come up with. And as Steve's pointing out, she took that line of thinking a bit further to, well, you would obviously tailor it for your client, whatever it is that your client wants these reports to read. And these special government employees that are the liaison in the first place may have different types of clients and not necessarily even American clients. That's right, Steve. And could be foreign governments, foreign intelligence agencies. If there's no oversight, there's no legislation about it, and you just got some anonymous person that's running the app, and you don't even know where the investment funding came from, there's a lot of questions to be answered about scenarios like that, indeed.
It's funny, again, how ironic it is that these corporations that are in the topic of disclosure and fighting for disclosure and transparency won't be transparent about something as basic as who owns the company, who gave the initial funding for the company. Yeah.
Now, of course, we've got, as far as Enigma is concerned, we've got rumors. And of course, the rumor is that Peter Thiel funded the company. That's been the rumor for quite a while. And I know a lot of people that, like MUFON board members, that have specifically stated that Thiel gave them $7 million to start Enigma. But of course, we don't have evidence of this. It's just rumors. But that's been the main rumor that has gone around for, a few years.
They won't, am I correct that Enigma declined to deny that too? Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think they made any statements as far as that goes. I'm like, and I've been quite, like, I know, like, Alejandro Rojas works for Enigma. And like, I've, talked on a few occasions, but they're really vague about, who actually runs the company and like what the goals are. And there's just not a lot of whole transparency coming out of Enigma.
Did they do a whole OSAP Jeff thing where someone approached MUFON and said, "Give me your data so I can have a bedrock of data"? You said they approached MUFON for millions of dollars for what?
No, they didn't approach MUFON. I said I know people on the MUFON board that have said that they heard that Thiel gave Enigma millions of dollars.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard the whole like OSAP.
No.
Yeah.
I've heard
Bigelow thing.
The NDAs at Enigma are pretty airtight as well, which is something, I don't know. Do other UFO research organizations have NDAs? Maybe. I haven't heard about them if they do, but it's odd.
And Jeff, am I correct that Enigma has had representatives or people saying they represent Enigma purchasing archives and information from other UFO organizations? Is that correct? Or archives?
I have not heard that personally. most of this, what I've seen Enigma do is like they do outreach things where they sometimes go to like festivals and fairs to try to get people signed up and using their app more. But I have not heard of them acquiring archives or material at this point. And I think they'd probably, again, keep that pretty secret. You know, they'd probably hide that behind a bunch of NDAs and whatnot, which, you know, it's pretty, like, again, it goes back to the lack of transparency for an organization that's, you know, supposed to be providing, you know, UFO information to the public. You know, they're acting more like a secret government agency than they are, you know, a public facing, public benefit for the UFO community kind of company.
An anonymous CEO is demanding transparency from Washington.
That's correct. I'll say one more thing on this as well, is that you know, at a minimum it's capitalistic, right? At a maximum it's invasion of privacy. But there, you know, folks in my industry like Publishers Clearinghouse, like what's their business model? Well, they want your data because everyone wants a chance to win $1 million, but then Ford wants to know who's going to drive the next mid-size SUV, right? And so you make lists, and then now they're for sale. And at a minimum, it seems to be that, just data collection, big data, selling lists, selling profiles of whoever's got a sophisticated targeting system. Yeah, anyway. Okay, so interesting thing for me to dig in later, but and then it came back to UFOs somehow, so that was pretty incredible.
Yeah,
apologies if I missed this earlier, but Jack and others, does Jensen Andresen talk about, like, I know the data mining is a big aspect of that, and that's something not to be undervalued, as Bryan said, but like, is there a possibility too that they're using that as like a real-time intelligence monitoring system? Like, I took this picture of this thing I saw in the sky, that might be useful to a government agency more than it would be to Joe Schmo on the street.
That came up a lot around the first decade of this century. That came up a lot with the MUFON reporting system, that you could get stories through the Vine that there would be activity monitoring the MUFON reports, and especially around military bases. And it seemed to get pretty dysfunctional. That what if people are putting fake reports on there that are IC assets? And what if people are pulling reports and monitoring reports that are IC assets? And besides all of the implications of that, what does it mean for just a hobbyist that wants to read the case reports and know what's going on? Almost becomes just a complete exercise in futility. And there has been some discussion over that's why an organization like MUFON continues to otherwise rather inexplicably continue to catalog UFO reports endlessly ad infinitum, because who's wanting them and who's reading them and what the locations are is maybe being monitored. That does start to sound a lot like James Carrion's work of 1950s, 1960s, 1940s spycraft, of if you put different names in the same AP article around Oak Ridge, Tennessee, than you do around the places out west that are testing nuclear weapons. then you can get an idea, if you intercept those messages, of where the adversaries are and what newspapers they're reading, which, you know, lets you know where they are. Yeah, it starts to sound like that if you're going to leave a UFO reporting system up and online that has just not been functional for literally decades, but you're leaving it there, that would be somewhat of a sensible reason why that you're monitoring the traffic on it and the location of the traffic. Yeah.
Because I mean, if
And one
you're
thing
testing,
oh, go ahead, Jeff.
say if you're testing a new drone or a new aircraft or something of some kind, what better way to see if the public is paying any notice to it than to check to see if anybody's reporting, you know, UFO sightings in the area while you're doing your test. I mean, if I was running security and counter intel on some sort of project like that, I'd be checking UFO sighting report databases to see, you know, if anybody's seeing what we've got up there. And if you want to even go even further, like you said, maybe they could even plant some fake reports, kind of make it even more ridiculous of a situation.
And
Yeah,
like
and to
you
get
were
back on
saying,
the-
go ahead, Steve, please
Oh.
go ahead.
No, I just want to say, like, to get back onto the one-way street of the transparency, like when you use a program like Enigma, you're giving consent that they can use your information for anything that they want, including things like government contracts, right? Could be part of that.
Yeah, that you're consenting to market this, and that doesn't mean just to General Motors necessarily, no. And like what you're saying, Jeff, like what you had said about reading people's descriptions of known meteors, a database like MUFON could be useful for that too. That if you know what was launched from the Navy base in Tampa at a specific time, and then you see people's descriptions of it, you can see how accurate or incorrect, and that would give you a baseline on, once again, seeing that people generally don't have any idea what they saw, but you could see to how poorly they describe it. Yeah. So I think what we're getting at here, as we've discussed with intelligence agency uses of a resource, are going to be all of the above every time. Like they're just not going to leave any meat on the bone, and then they're going to make soup out of the bone.
Yeah, it almost seems like, why wouldn't they be interested in something like that, right?
Yeah.
And the possibilities, as most of us know, are just endless for these types of data collection, you know, agencies.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like now we know that all those times we were filling out CAPTCHAs online to prove that we're human, that data was being sold to train AI models. And so we've actually been helping train AI models this whole time. All those people going around playing Pokemon Go with their ARs on their phones, same situation. That data was like sold off to Palantir or some other companies, like for whatever nefarious purposes. So this whole time you think you're using apps, just playing games or having fun, that data might have secondary uses that company is then selling off. And that may be more profitable for that company to sell your data off than whatever you're playing the actual game for. The game is secondary.
Yeah, Pokemon Go was an NQTEL investment. Yeah. When that one first broke, and there were a lot of people around Orlando gathering in parks and running up and down the street on their phones playing, it was difficult not to envision that, wow, this could be really effective to like jam up an intersection or shut down a public building, like you just flood, hundreds of people to it simultaneously, theoretically. Yeah.
Did you
And
think of getting like an industrial signal jammer then, so that none of the kids could bring their In-Q-Tel app near your house?
Kids, there were grown men and women running up and down the boulevard chasing Pokemon.
Right.
Yeah, it was used. It's been used to train things like robotic, like self-driving cars and like vision systems. But it's also been rumored that they've used it for military drones and positional targeting systems and whatnot. That they've used that data. So it's you really got to be careful about what kind of data you're giving away for free to these companies.
Yeah, no, they definitely partnered with this company, Vantor, which is an intelligence company to develop, this was reported in the news like a month ago, to develop visual positioning systems, basically. And so Niantic Spatial saying that they aren't using any of the data itself, but they're just giving them the AI that was developed from the data. So whatever that's supposed to mean.
The final product instead of the data they used to build the product, basically. And of course they'll say that like we've anonymized the data somehow, like that, so they can't tie it back to real people. So it doesn't matter that they've borrowed all of this data.
I mean, I know what kind of data they're talking about because I used to play Pokemon Go a lot, and they started doing this thing where you go to a site and scan the site with your phone, and then you get in-game rewards. And I don't think that it's pretty compromising for individuals. Well, I mean, I guess it could be if it's depending on how it's used, yeah. But I'm not even sure if I believe Niantic Spatial because yeah, I don't know. I think they could be lying.
Any other thoughts? Well, let's continue reading.
Readers will recall we went down the trail of Pinky Thompson after finding an FBI memo of which he was the subject, located in an FBI file on Joseph Bryant III. We subsequently discovered E. Howard Hunt's assertion Hunt and Thompson worked for Bryan in a political and psychological warfare unit. The unit was a subdivision of a 1948 through 1952 CIA and State Department front called the Office of Policy Coordination. Another individual Hunt identified as a member of the unit was Philadelphia investment banker Gates Lloyd, a misspelling of a CIA man, H. Gates Lloyd II. Horatio Gates Lloyd II, born 1900, died 1993, was described in a 1993 New York Times obituary as a Philadelphia investment banker who also served for 10 years as a deputy director of the CIA. He graduated from Princeton in 1923 and joined Drexel and Company, a Philadelphia investment bank founded by his father, where in 1927 he was made a partner of the firm. Mr. Lloyd joined the CIA in 1950, the article continued, and was appointed deputy director in 1954, a position he held until his retirement in 1964. A FOIA request submitted to the FBI resulted in a response indicating no records were located pertaining to H. Gates Lloyd II. A search of the CIA website, however, revealed many published declassified documents pertaining to Lloyd. Among them was a 1955 CIA memo verifying his appointment as Deputy Director of Support, shown on the following page. Another 1955 CIA memo, subject implementation of a verbal understanding between DCI and Mr. Nelson Rockefeller, was sent to the attention of Gates Lloyd. It advised him an agreement had been reached between DCI Dulles and Nelson Rockefeller for a method of dispersal of funding to be used as directed by Mr. Rockefeller, but not specifically exact objects or purposes which it is to be used. The most practical method of making funds available, it was determined, would be to simply increase the CIA's contribution to PCG, apparently for such expenses as a consultant. Further research revealed the PCG, or Planning Coordination Group, was chaired by Nelson Rockefeller. A transcript of a 1955 memo posted at the Office of the Historian indicates the group was set up within the Herbert Hoover-led Operations Coordinating Board. The Planning Coordination Group established, the memo states, to aid in developing planning in both overt and covert fields and to advise and assist the responsible operating agencies in the coordinated development of plans and programs to carry out those national security policies appropriate to its functions. The memo further indicates the functions and composition of the PCG were described in a budget director's memo to the president entitled Coordination of Economic, Psychological, Political Warfare, and Foreign Information Activities. The historic record suggests the PCG may have been intended to function in a capacity of coordinating and overseeing covert activities, but Rockefeller rather quickly identified its futility. Essentially, the CIA was not to be restrained. Incidentally, Nelson Rockefeller, Daniel Inouye, Barry Goldwater, who supported NICAP, and other notables would go on to sit on Senate committees conducting inquiries into CIA activities and MKUltra. Joe Biden numbered among them as well. In a September 1956 CIA memo authored by Gates Lloyd, shows he continued to play a supporting role in CIA finances from his position as deputy director. Lloyd advised Director of Training about budgets for position ceilings for fiscal years 57 and 58. The ceiling allowances, which are redacted, are applicable to both military and civilian personnel, Lloyd wrote in the memo. During an email exchange with Mary Jo Watts pertaining to circumstances surrounding Pinky Thompson, she described a network of CIA assets involved in transferring money into the Geisteicher Fund. The operation included a relative of Dulles and employees at the financial institutions. She mentioned one of the group was involved with the Pennsylvania Investment Bank. Suspecting the individual may have something to do with Gates Lloyd and his work as a Philadelphia investment banker, I mentioned him to Watts. She was indeed familiar with Lloyd and responded with research tips surrounding the following information. In September 1977, Senator Edward Kennedy presided over a Senate Health and Scientific Committee conducting inquiries into human drug testing done by the CIA. Dr. Charles Geisteicher testified to the committee and responded to questions posed by Senator Robert Schweiker. The senator asked how Geisteicher Fund received money designated for MKUltra subprojects. Page 90 of a hearing transcript PDF indicates Dr. Geisteicher, explained the original conduit was a Philadelphia foundation. Upon further questioning about the Geisteicher Fund role in distributing CIA money, the doctor described the system in which universities submitted research proposals and he would in turn see the projects were funded. Senator Schweiker then further sought clarification. The previously described Philadelphia Foundation acted as a funding agency. Yes, Dr. Geisteicher testified. We only got Senator Schweiker, and we only got about $75,000 anonymously in our books that I can trace to the CIA. All this money that we are talking about, the big volume of money, came through the Philadelphia Foundation. Mary Jo Watts explained the foundation was almost certainly an entity titled the Investment Association of Philadelphia. During the same hearing, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the director of MKUltra, testified he could not recall details about the Philadelphia connection. Historians will recognize Gottlieb's failing memory as a recurring tactic implemented by the CIA chemist when asked specifics about subprojects he oversaw. H. Gates Lloyd II had a son, H. Gates Lloyd III. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, He followed in the footsteps of his father, graduating from Princeton in 1950 and ensuring a future investment banking by taking a position at Drexel. In 1959, the Inquirer further reported Gates Lloyd III was made president of the Investment Association of Philadelphia. Files readily available in the CIA online reading room include an April 1956 Society column published by the Georgetowner. The article describes a dinner party hosted by the Undersecretary of the Army and his wife, honoring the Secretary of the Air Force and his wife. The 125 guests in attendance included Mrs. Frank Wisner, wife of the CIA officer who launched the Office of Policy Coordination, Joseph Bryan III, who headed up a political and psychological warfare subdivision of the OPC and was soon to sit on the NICAP Board of Governors, Mrs. Lewis Thompson, wife of Pinky, who worked for Bryan in the OPC, and CIA Deputy Director Gates Lloyd, who worked for Bryan in the OPC. A 1962 Washington Post Society article archived on the CIA website documented dozens of celebratory dinner parties taking place one September evening in Georgetown. The community was commemorating the reopening of a refurbished landmark tavern. Mrs. Wisner's participation was again noted. Attending another party were Mr. and Mrs. Gates Lloyd, along with Mr. and Mrs. Desmond Fitzgerald. You will recall Des Fitzgerald was a high New York profile attorney who chaired the Committee of 5 Million, worked in the OPC, and became a powerful CIA officer.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. I also had another document I wanted to share with you guys here. Since the time I wrote the book, I got some records on Pinky Thompson from the CIA, and they look like this. This is indicative of them. There's a handful of them that show this is the earliest one, and then they show his transferring around the CIA and being an intelligence officer, verifying it as if it's in question. But always good to get that confirmation from the horse's mouth. And they were willing to give these records with vague descriptions of his responsibilities and purposes, but you can see that. And in this circumstance, I believe they were willing to give the records because, as you can see on that document, it had not been released till that point in time, 2021. But I think they acknowledged to me that they had some other instances of publicly acknowledging a relationship with him, probably like the calendars we'd looked at and things like that. And that influenced their decision that instead of giving me that Glomar response of they'll neither confirm nor deny unless they've made a public acknowledgement of the relationship, they felt like the relationship was reasonably established and provided me those records. So I get interested like in how the process works, you know, like why will they give me those records, but they just say, you know, Joseph Bryan, our research does not indicate a publicly acknowledged relationship. Same with Nicholas de Roquefort. And so that's just kind of how that works. As I've become more familiar with that process, I feel a little less frustrated with it, actually. Like, I don't think there's just a CIA analyst somewhere that gets a request and says, I'm just damn well not giving you records on Nicholas de Roquefort. I think there's a flow chart that they research what's publicly available. And if there's nothing in there about him, it doesn't matter what's not publicly available. And that's just how that works. Now, we can argue whether it should work that way or not, but I mean, it just is how it works. But yeah, time and time again, as far as the material we just went through, we can see that, you know, Joseph Bryan, Gates Lloyd, the Wisners, you know, all of these people are hanging out together. And as Bryan and others have scratched our heads about time and time again as well, we keep wondering and asking, how credulous does someone have to be to think that they just kind of had a UFO research group together? You know, I see that as like a near zero possibility, but we've also talked about objectivity. I'm willing to acknowledge what can be actually proven and what can't. But I feel like the more we become aware of how intelligence agencies operate and what they're doing, and we can read their charters, and we can read why offices were formed, and we can read what intelligence officers were tasked with doing, it looks pretty clear to me that the collision with the UFO community was not recreational. As we talked about last week, to me, it even looks like these guys were the UFO community.
I love that it was some society articles, you know, like this Instagram of their day that was the bridge that allowed you to get that.
Yeah, man. There was an article last week, like Jeff and I had talked about a few weeks ago, that even though the kind of the going narrative in UFO land still is we didn't know Joe Bryan was CIA until later, and then we're going to accuse him of sabotaging NICAP and this, that, and the other. In 1953, 3 years before NICAP was incorporated, a gossip columnist identified him as a member of the Central Intelligence Agency, just matter-of-factly, like, he's an author, he's going to be writing about this famous foreign person, but he moved to DC with his wife because he joined the CIA and yada, yada, yada. But like supposed inside UFO investigators couldn't figure it out when it was in the newspaper, you know? And am I going to laugh at them and call them incompetent? I don't think so. Not as much as obtuse. Like they just rather they got a lot riding on NICAP. Like if you throw out a lot of what NICAP did or NICAP legitimacy, there's not a lot of UFO stuff going on for that era. There's some.
It kind of says a lot on its own, though, doesn't it?
It does. I think it says a whole lot. Yeah. Thus the book, like I got more interested in the implications about the present from what I was learning than I really was interested in Frank Wisner or Pinky Thompson. Yeah.
I think a lot of us that have read the book felt the same way. That's what drew us to continue reading it. At least I can speak for myself. It was the insights that it was giving me into the events of today, possibly.
Thank you.
Well, I want to know what's up with the intelligence community and the professional flutist or recorder playing community, as a lot of these CIA names that pop up in UFO files, such as the guy that was in charge of the CIA's Physics and Electronics Division, he actually ran the DC chapter of the American Recorder Society with a whole bunch of other spies from the CIA. You also
Interesting.
have the NSA guy Kalamahos, who wrote that paper on a potential extraterrestrial signal. He was a professional flutist and recorder player. And so there's a whole bunch of CIA people involved with the recorder or flute community, and I want to know what's going on there.
A lot of it can come down to the same reason why they're in the society pages. Highbrow wasps have to do dumb things like that.
Well, it sounds like there's certainly some threads to pull on there, Jeff. Start cracking to it, man.
Yeah. It's did they have a legit interest in the recorder, or is this just another NICAP situation going on here? Who knows?
I could never figure out why they taught the recorder in school. Was that some kind of psychological campaign as well? To like drive teachers insane or something.
It's all part of MKUltra. We just haven't heard about it yet.
Any other comments, or read one more section?
E. Howard Hunt, who described himself as working for Joseph Bryan in the OPC, wrote a number of novels. In the OPC, Hunt secured a contract with a publisher to do several paperbacks. It is not known how many total books the CIA sponsored, as a list has never been disclosed, but the New York Times alleged in 1977 the agency was responsible for the publication of at least 1,000 books. As previously explored, Hunt went on to be credited with playing a key role in Operation PB Success and its destabilization of the government in Guatemala. His activities of note were many and diverse and have filled entire books. He is best known for his role as Watergate plumber. So what about the other members of the Office of Policy Coordination's Political and Psychological Warfare Unit as identified by Hunt and others? Let's take a look at more of Bryan's crew, but first, for context, let's take a look at what Hunt wrote about the OPC and Bryan's group.
And I'll just summarize this, that Joseph Bryan III ran the group, and it included writer Finis Farr, Philadelphia investment banker Gates Lloyd, Pinky Thompson, who we've explored, Carleton Alsop, a former movie producer and Hollywood agent, and Hugh Troy, who was an artist and illustrator. Thank you, Bryan, and please continue when you're ready.
Yep. Finis Farr is an experienced journalist, but not, to put it charitably, a great biographer. A 1973 book review published in the New York Times began. Perhaps the circumstances would have been more clear to the reviewer had they known Mr. Farr was another of Joseph Bryan's recruits in an OPC psychological warfare unit. Finis Farr, born New Year's Eve, 1904, and deceased January 3, 1982, was in the Princeton class of 1926. The J. Bryan Papers collection maintained at a Princeton library, Bryan was the class of 1927, includes some 500 letters exchanged between Farr and Joseph Bryan. The library collections are not available to the public as of this writing due to renovations being made. Farr, known as a writer with Hollywood connections, came on board with the OPC at the same time as Carleton Alsop. Carleton William Alsop, 1900 to 1979, aka Carleton Alsop, was considered in his day to be the CIA's most valuable asset in Hollywood. That was really saying something, considering the mid-20th century agency reached in Fox, MGM, Universal, Disney, and now lists many other production companies and film executives to have been among his propaganda arsenal. Alsop operated undercover as a producer and agent of Paramount Studios. He worked with Judy Garland in the late 1940s and early 1950s, by which time he had joined Wisner, Bryan, Hunt, and the Political and Sociological Warfare Division of the OPC. Alsop's responsibilities and contributions went on to include compiling movie reports. His work was part of a larger CIA campaign to discredit Soviet claims about discrimination in the U.S. against people of color and the accompanying issues of low pay, unequal justice, and violence. The Soviets took the Soviets took frequent advantage of opportunities to emphasize America's history of poor race relations. Alsop subsequently assisted the agency in monitoring communists in Hollywood and reported on the success and failure of a covert group he led. The group was in charge with introducing specific themes into films that featured CIA objectives and often minimized aspects of racism and oppression otherwise commonly found in the United States. It was Alsop and Farr who were dispatched by the CIA to England after George Orwell's death in 1950 to meet his widow and secure the film rights to Animal Farm. The rights acquired, Hunt secured a producer, Farr and Alsop, funneled CIA funds into the project, and production began in November 1951. The most ambitious animated film ever made at the time included 80 cartoonists and arguably had minimal resemblance to the message portrayed in Orwell's classic writing. This moral and greedy, power-hungry communists were impossible to discern from greedy, power-hungry capitalists was replaced with much more overtly positive framing of CIA-promoted values. Incidentally, writer and researcher Robbie Graham documented CIA influence in Hollywood, particularly including its portrayal of flying saucers and incoming extraterrestrials. The involvement of the agency asset was present in the making, for instance, of the iconic 1951 classic, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Alsop reportedly once turned down an offer from Walt Disney to manage Disneyland and was known for mingling with stars, many of whom he contributed to their careers in some fashion. While executing a career as a CIA officer, he was a Tinseltown publicist, advertising executive, and radio and film producer. Hugh Troy, 1906 to 1964, of Bryan's outfit, was an artist and award-winning writer of children's books. He painted noteworthy murals in addition to his talents as an illustrator and wrote for Life magazine, The New Yorker, and Esquire. A native of Ithaca, New York, Troy attended Cornell, but was reportedly suspended without receiving a degree. Even the fact his father was a professor at the university was not enough to save him from the wrath of faculty grown tired of his practical jokes. Hugh Troy had an absolutely famous penchant for clever gags, to a legendary extent as a matter of the fact. Populist humorist H. Allen Smith, in his book The Complete Practical Joker, referred to Troy as the most imaginative and ingenious of all practical jokers. Troy holds the distinction of having been credited with devising an epic Cornell stunt during a winter snowstorm. He took a wastebasket made out of rhinoceros foot and used it to make it appear tracks had been left across the campus. The trail led to BB Lake, which the colleagues used as a source of drinking water. It was there where the tracks came to an end that Troy created a large cracked area in the ice covering the lake. Perhaps he experienced a bit of remorse over the next few days as people stopped drinking the water. Troy reportedly sent an anonymous note to administrators, revealing it was a joke and confessing how it was executed. Other tricks in his bag included a bit where he got arrested leaving Central Park with a park bench. Upon reaching the police station, he produced a bill of sale for the bench, demonstrating he owned it and had brought it with him to the park. As unconfirmed legend has it, police got so tired of the routine, they ceased questioning the smart aleck who liked to walk around the park with a bench. Troy then enlisted the help of his buddies to make off one night, one by one, with every bench in the park. His college hijinks also reportedly included some stunts in which he and his team of pranksters dressed to appear like a work crew. In one instance, they descended upon the Waldorf Astoria Hotel and removed all the light bulbs without being questioned. In another, they began digging a hole in the street with presumed authority. As the story goes, police even showed up and helped divert traffic. At some point, the band simply left, leaving the police in town with a hole in the street. Funny guy, that young man, destined to be a CIA recruit. His talent at perception management is evident, and I must say I found the implications to UFO hoaxes intriguing, particularly considering his artistic abilities. Mirage Men, indeed. Perhaps there is the odd UFO case of 3 of the 1950s, followed by anonymous confessions it was a hoax. At any rate, Troy's understanding of behavior and inducing incorrect assumptions did not escape the writer, nor apparently the CIA. In 1951, he moved to Washington, D.C., presumably in relation to the agency and OPC. While we are left to wonder the extent of these men may have been involved in the UFO mix, that is much less the case with Joseph Bryan. The colonel was among the military officials thrust upon the public by NICAP and apparently headed by the board when Major Kehoe and Gordon Lohr were relieved of responsibilities. Bryan's UFO advocacy, ostensibly or otherwise, included his state position on UFO as contained in a 1966 article published in the DC-based Sunday Star and archived at the CIA. The article, Flying Saucers Again, Do You Believe in Them?, was authored by retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Charles Cooke. The piece described Bryan as one of NICAP's most highly qualified members of its board of governors and noted Bryan's former position as special agent to the Secretary of Air Force and former member of the staff of Supreme Allied Commander at NATO, General Loris Norstad. It is my opinion, Bryan was quoted, that the UFOs reported by competent observers are devices under intelligent control, that their speeds, maneuvers, and their technical evidence prove them superior to any aircraft or space device now produced on Earth, and that these UFOs are interplanetary devices systematically observing the Earth, either manned or under remote control, or both. Colonel Cooke further reported that a photo published in the story was provided by NICAP. The image depicted a plane and alleged a nearby flying saucer, a dubious interpretation at best. A more clear copy of the article and photo than archived at CIA may be viewed at Jan Aldrich's Project 1947 website.
Thank you, Bryan. Thanks for reading. And yes, here is that photo as archived at Project 1947. That, interestingly, was provided by NICAP for that article that Joseph Bryan had the endorsement of an extraterrestrial explanation. Kind of makes me wonder if Joseph Bryan gave him the photo, but I don't know. It just said provided by NICAP.
It's kind of funny. I was just working on a case post for that article yesterday, the Charles Cooke article in the Washington Sunday Times, because it also talks about how, in his opinion, evidence from Air Force pilots kind of leads to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And that's another thing. Charles Cooke was the guy that he used to be the editor of the Air Intelligence Digest, which was like an intelligence magazine inside the Air Force. Occasionally ran things like on the ghost rockets back in 1946, like they had an article on them, and flying saucers and stuff in more recent issues.
Was that Kehoe's role when he was prior to writing for magazines?
Was what?
Was that Kehoe's role also? Didn't he write technical papers for the Air Force, or is that incorrect?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
I don't know what all he wrote. He wrote a lot of different places. When he was, I think, a Marine pilot, he flew balloons, I think.
Yeah, I was going to also mention that the whole thing about Orwell and Animal Farm explains why Joseph Bryan III is actually listed as a writer credit on the movie when you look it up on IMDb.
Interesting.
Which movie is that, Jeff?
The 1950s Animal Farm movie.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that picture from the Cooke article, you said that came from NICAP files, but do we know what case it came from?
The photo, I do not. No, I understand your question now. I do not.
I find it interesting because to me it doesn't really look like a saucer. It looks like a plane at a weird angle. But maybe that's just I don't know. I wonder if like no, I'm getting too sleepy.
Yeah, it looks to me like something blurry that's moving, that it, if I had to guess, and I am way out of my wheelhouse on photo analysis, but it just looks to me like something a couple inches from a camera that's moving fast.
I had a question for the group. Reading the Hollywood involvement in all of this, I'm reminded of the Robertson panel. So how do you reconcile the Robertson panel's recommendation that they stray away from UFOs because of Soviet scares and all the reasons that went to the Robertson panel, and then at the same time you have folks who have control of this that are writing? Is that a paradox there, Jack, that you see in terms of what they were doing with the writing aspect of it, but also trying to make sure that we debunk it at the same time? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, it is. Like with Rockefeller being appointed to provide oversight and planning and coordination, and dealing with the accountant Gates Lloyd to get the funding to do it is like a snake eating its tail somewhat. I'm open to hearing other people's ideas too about, does the message just not get out, or is the message bigger from Project Grudge that said, and Project Sign that says we need to alert the psychological warfare people to the potential of flying saucers? How do you square the Robertson panel's findings of minimize public hysteria with you're also cultivating and promoting the flying saucer meme?
Gives you a bit of a deniability, doesn't it? To say, no, we think that this is something dangerous psychologically, and I don't know. I feel like they knew the public was never going to take the prosaic explanations. I feel like that was sort of a non-starter, regardless of how they kind of sliced it. And I don't know. I feel like they definitely just even if it was just like random branches of different agencies and organizations that saw some sort of psychological warfare potential in it, I think at the very least it would have been tested. I mean, they were dropping. I was talking with somebody a few weeks ago about them dropping radioactive chemicals over the city of St. Louis, and I think like, what's a little UFO psychological warfare compared to poisoning an entire city? Like they would have done it. It would have been no big deal.
Spraying chemicals on the subway, what's a little white lie in the newspaper? I also feel like that part of the cover up and the mishandling of the topic, like some of what we see in the Condon Committee and some of the CIA admitted now mishandling of like circumstances with Leon Davidson, that they just say, we just wouldn't do it that way if we had it to do over again. I feel like that kind of was like, we just want to minimize this and not get people all flustered. And the more they tried to act like they weren't interested in it, the more people called them out for being disingenuous. And so I think some of that does reflect it. But I think it was, yeah, it was just too tempting then to start playing the games of, well, we're already caught anyway, so let's keep pretending we're not interested and everybody's going to know we're lying, and let's act like it was about something that it's not for the Soviet analysts. And like the games just got too tempting not to play. And they look, from my vantage point, like they still are.
I was gonna say in response to your question, it's possible. I mean, I don't know. This is sort of speculative, but I was thinking about similar things, and it's like, well, maybe, they're catering to different demographics or something like that. Like if you're gonna send out like a signal through like Hollywood media or something, it's gonna be a very different kind of signal and might speak to a very particular audience. Whereas, the Robertson panel, that might speak to a different sort of audience.
Indeed, it would.
The Robertson panel was right.
They were.
Yep.
That's true. And yeah, people think that there's no psychological implications to psychological warfare implications, rather. Everybody thinks there's psychological implications.
Was there, this is, I should look this up, but does anyone know, was there any documentation that would suggest a shift in policy on leveraging UFOs as a counterintelligence narrative? And if so,
From
when
the
did
CIA?
that happen?
That would never ever come out.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if there was ever like a document found saying like, oh, what if we used UFOs as like a counter intel thing? Nothing like that.
There was
Well,
there was an unspoken agreement that they found.
I mean, there's the one memo from about the Psychological Strategy Board that mentions potentially the benefit of flying saucers for psychological warfare. But I think that's pretty much the only memo that I've seen.
It was just like an email sent off, a one-off kind of thing, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it was Walter Bedell Smith, like 1952 or
Yeah, yeah. Smith was concerned about how it could be used. And I feel like the relevance of that is that he and Howard Hunt and that crew were decorated for their work in the Guatemala coup. And it was a 1954 CIA cable about that Guatemala coup that suggested assets might want to consider fabricating a big UFO story to divert attention from CIA activity in the area. But as far as let's tap the brakes or let's hit the gas, any more than just the occasional thing like that, I'm not aware of, other than like the Robertson panel just full on saying that this has the potential for a lot of public hysteria.
I think your question raises a good point too, because I think the fact that we have NICAP and multiple other tendrils that are just like chock-a-block, as Emily would say, with CIA people, and yet the internal policy is generally like, after the Robertson panel, I think there's a few letters from Dulles where he's basically like, contact the Air Force, contact someone else, not our purview, even though it very much seems like.
I think Hoover said that, didn't he?
Yeah, they were always playing gotcha. Richard Hall was writing them. Kehoe was writing them and saying, but you said you don't have any investigation into UFOs, but your FBI guy was at this such and such address doing such and such and so and so. And I find some of that kind of interesting, and that what if Hoover wasn't lying when he says when he's basically telling Kehoe, I didn't ask for those photos of that UFO sighting because I'm interested in UFOs, could very well be true. You know, like, that's not what I was investigating. Just because I send a man that shows up and asks for UFO photos doesn't mean he's investigating UFOs by any means.
And yet, 2 years after the Robertson panel, you still have memos by CIA's Todos Odorenko, Mr. American Recorder Society himself, saying that the CIA should maintain a file of UFO sightings, but deny all investigations are active and separate explainable UFOs from unidentified reports. So they still, even years later, were collecting files and are interested in the UFO topic. They just didn't want it to be publicly associated with it. They wanted to deny any interest whatsoever in it. That, you know, we're collecting files, but we're not interested in it, is basically the position they took.
That's interesting. It ties back too into, do I have the name right? Was it Ray Palmer that I wrote about that was visited by the FBI and name dropped the CIA and said, I'm sending the Chicago office the interesting stories that I get and that they want them, is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, Jeff,
And I still doubt that the majority of it had anything to do with UFOs from the FBI and CIA perspective, but please go ahead, Tanner.
Jeff, what do you think that means towards the supposed weird desk that continued in the 70s, 80s, and 90s at the CIA? Edited by either Kit Green or Ron Pandolfi, depending on who you're asking.
Man, I don't know that, like, there's any, like, connected thread up to the weird desk. Like, I almost think, like, that stuff was, you know, maybe those guys had an interest in it on their own for whatever reason, and they started their own kind of thing separate. There's always been, you know, just like any organization, there's going to be people that are also just interested in the topic for whatever reason and might start their own things. And that's what we see, you know, with a lot of these so-called government UFO groups. They're not official. Everything from ATIP, which was little more than a group of people from the old OSAP program who didn't want to give up the UFO hunt and kind of had their own unofficial kind of a project, going back to like things like the advanced working group, like John Alexander stuff and OK Shannon and all that kind of stuff. So there's always been like these people that are in intelligence that kind of start their own little weird groups where they look at this kind of stuff. And how much of that is because of like some sort of overall like policy or interest of the CIA? Who knows? I think we have to remember, as like Jack and others have pointed out, like governments like the CIA aren't a monolith, right? Like there's all sorts of people doing all sorts of shady stuff, and the right hand may not know what the left hand's doing at any given time. So
yeah, interesting you bring that up, because I've been kind of wondering, I've looked a little more than I typically look at current UFO stuff about this Avi Loeb announcement that he's supposed to head up a UAP study group. And I've paid pretty close attention to the wording that, like at the Disclosure Foundation, they attribute him with saying, giving them the information that he's been appointed by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the AARO, the Anomaly Office, another one, and the FBI, and he says other members of the intelligence community, whatever that's supposed to mean exactly. And my hunch is he got somebody during a phone call to say, yeah, look into it. And that's what he's gonna now. That's just my hunch that he's promoting as, I've been appointed by the FBI to study UAP. I could easily see that somebody over lunch said, let me know what you find out. He's running with it like he's a new division or office of the federal government.
Yeah, it's not super common for offices like that to be announced on a personal Medium page, That's, as far as I'm aware, the first place it was mentioned, which is unusual.
Yeah, that's the thing. Pretty much most of what we got from that, at least for the first several days, was 100% from Avi Loeb himself. Eventually, the government came out and said, well, we are creating an advisory board, which is not Avi Loeb's board. And this board of people may consult with other groups that we talk to. And apparently Avi Loeb's little group would be maybe one of these other groups. But there's still, I have not seen anything from the government mentioning Avi Loeb or his organization, just that they've created a UFO advisory group that will be consulting with other organizations. So,
yeah, and like you say, there's even some discrepancy on its title or whether there's two different groups. Yeah, like they're using two different names. Yeah, another OSAP ATIP bit. Yeah.
Was the wording from ODNI that there was a UAP advisory council to the UAP disclosure board, but that is not Loeb's thing? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they announced that they do have an advisory council, but it's not it's not specifically Loeb's thing. It's actually people that are appointed. Because for something to be an advisory council, there's actually specific laws, I guess, that have to be followed and like put in place, and they have to have like report their meetings and have like complete transparency of who's involved and all this kind of stuff. And so there apparently is an official advisory council, but it's not specifically what Loeb is talking, Avi Loeb is talking about. His kind of team, I think what happened is similar to like what Jack maybe mentions, is he was talking to somebody on a phone who called him, wanted advice and stuff, and he kind of ran with it on his own. Like, okay, I'll put together a group of people. And I think his group would be more just like an unofficial advisors to this actual advisory council that exists, which does not contain Loeb.
He has a pretty adamant statement on disclosure.org. I think it's called the Disclosure Foundation, that I couldn't tell you exactly what it says. I couldn't quote it verbatim, but the takeaway certainly leaves the emotional impression that this is ultra official. And as you're suggesting, Tanner, I have my doubts I'd be reading about it on disclosure.org if that were the case.
Oh, that's where I get all my news.
But these are the times we're living in, folks.
I think, interestingly, this sort of ties back to things we were talking about earlier, because I wrote an article that came out just right after Loeb announced this, and key to his pitch essentially is we are solving problems that the intelligence community and military can run into. So he's still doing the venture capital UFO military, please give me money, even though I'm already on the board, or
Yeah, I saw that one. They need scientists to help them out when they need to know what's right and what's wrong kind of statement. I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So according to this article on Defense Scoop, it's called the UAP Governance Board. And according to the ODNI, they met officially, whenever they announced that, like a week or two ago or whatever. But that wasn't Avi Loeb's group. But they do say they confirmed the board is supported by several advisory groups with expertise and work outside of the government. And this includes Loeb's like UOP Science Advisory Council is what he calls it. So he's like an outside advisor to the actual official, his group is an outside advisor to the UAP governance board, which is an official thing that the ODNI created.
I really appreciate all of your time and attention. So I'll try to get this wrapped up. But along with that, Jeff, I do have to say, so at some point, isn't anybody gonna go, so what in the hell happened with Galileo?
Yeah.
They
He
didn't
still needs
find
$1 billion.
anything, Jack. They kind of wanted to fade away because they didn't find extraterrestrial life. Sorry, Jeff, what were you gonna say?
I was just saying he didn't get the $1 billion that he needed, and so Galileo's on the back burner.
He definitely wants money. He had another article. For some reason, a mutual friend of several of us, Bradley, always sends me Avi Loeb's Medium articles. And he had one where he was calling for a Manhattan Project of UAP. It's like, why would you ever need that? Sorry.
The Invisible College redo.
Yeah, but you got to give it Manhattan Project levels.
Surprise, Avi Loeb wants 1/10 of the national budget to go to a project that he'll head, right?
It's like you've heard of the Bridge to Nowhere, right? We are doing one that is 10 times, 1,000 times more expensive than that. And it's going to be great, and it probably won't result in any findings of significance.
Any closing thoughts?
I will say that Pinky Thompson appears to be the Forrest Gump of the 1950s. He just is in every photo op ever around any historical circumstances with his finger in the pie and financing it. That's incredible. He's everywhere.
Yeah, when I got to the part about a memo on the couple that, were like the most notorious spy ring the FBI had ever rolled up, I was like, oh my gosh, this feels like getting to one of those things. Oh, and he was a neighbor of John F. Kennedy, kind of like, come on, and you put this in the calendar. Yeah. It is kind of Forrest Gumpy. Yeah. Rosenbergs. Yeah. Any final comments? Well, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate each of you guys' time and attention that come here for the weekly Zoom calls. And if you would like to participate, shoot me an email at jackbrewerblog@yahoo.com. I'll get you a free PDF of the book and put you on the list to receive the weekly Zoom invitations. We record on Wednesday nights. Please visit us at expandingfrontiersresearch.org. You can also visit our Patreon for more resources and interesting material, and you will find that email address and links to the items we have discussed tonight and additional resources in the YouTube show description. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Wayward Sons Book Group.